from the Antarctic ice sheets. And what we see is that in 2002 to 2005, we were losing mass from Greenland at a rate of about 150 cubic kilometers per year. Well, now that's doubled to about 300 cubic kilometers per year. And likewise, the mass loss from Antarctica has also doubled over that time period. So we can see that we're moving toward a tipping point where those ice sheets will begin to disintegrate more rapidly and sea level will go up. And that's one of the basis and others for saying that a safe level of carbon dioxide is actually less than what we have now.
Which is?
What we have now is 387 parts per million, but we're going to have to bring that down to 350 parts per million or less. And that's still possible provided we phase out coal emissions over the next few decades. That's possible. We would also have to prohibit unconventional fossil fuels like tar sands and oil shale. But if you look at what governments are doing, the reason that you know that the kind of accords they're talking about are not going to work is because look at what they're actually doing. The United States had just agreed to have a pipeline from the tar sands in Canada to the United States. Yes, so they're planning on actually burning those tar sands, which we can't do.
Explain how that works. What are the tar sands? I mean, this was a major issue in Copenhagen, and we played a number of pieces, especially Indigenous people, for example, marching on the Canadian embassy to try to stop the drilling.
They're among the dirtiest fossil fuels on the planet. There's oil mixed in the ground with the sand. You have to cook that material to get oil to drip out of it. That takes a lot of energy to cook it. And then you end up with oil, which also has carbon. And then you burn the oil, and you get more carbon. So it's much more carbon intensive than oil itself.
We get more oil from Canada than anywhere else in the world. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that, but the plan is, in the long run, there's much more there in tar sands than even in Saudi Arabia. So the point is, we're going to have to move to the energy system beyond fossil fuels. We need to drive the economic system so that we move to a clean energy future. And there are many other advantages in doing that, cleaning up the atmosphere, cleaning up the ocean. You get the mercury and arsenic and all these pollutants are coming from fossil fuels. So we need to get off this fossil fuel addiction. And the way you would do that is to put a gradually rising price on the carbon emissions.
How many times have you been arrested protesting now the issue of coal and mountaintop removal?
A couple of times in West Virginia with regard to the mountaintop removal, and in Boston where we were sleeping out on the Boston Commons.
So how did you go from being the head of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies to getting arrested for these protests?
Well, these protests are what we call civil resistance, in the same way that Gandhi did. We're trying to draw attention to the injustice, because this is really analogous. This is a moral issue, analogous to that faced by Lincoln with slavery or by Churchill with Nazism. Because what we have here is a tremendous case of intergenerational injustice, because we are causing the problem, but our children and grandchildren are going to suffer the consequences. And our parents didn't know that they were causing a problem for future generations, but we do. The science has become very clear, and we're going to have to move to a clean energy future. And we could do that. And there would be many other advantages of doing it. Why don't we do it? Because of the special interests and because of the role of money in Washington.
Now, you don't just protest outside of, these companies that do mountaintop removal. You were protesting outside the Natural Resources Defense Council, the NRDC.
Yeah, they and some other environmental organizations have become too much of the Washington scene, and they're trying to work on the terms that Washington now works on, in which the lobbyists are driving the legislation. We have to get the legislation designed in the public's interest, not in the interests of the people who have the money to influence the process.
We're going to break and then come back. Our guest today is James Hansen, Storms of My Children, The Truth About the Coming Climate Catastrophe, and Our Last Chance to Save Humanity is his first book. He's the director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, teaches at Columbia University. He's been arrested protesting coal mining and didn't go to Copenhagen because he wanted those talks to collapse, felt they wouldn't save the planet. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
It's the morning, I can see the sunrise burn away the moon. Shades of evening, they vanish as the light pours through my room. But today I'm on my way, send a word to mother that I'm coming home. 'Cause today I'm on my way, walk beneath the sun on a winter's day. Just a native son. Those days they told me I'll never change things. You know that I'll never break my own way. When I was young, when I would walk beneath the stars, always chase the angels to the desert. I'll go all the angels to the desert.
Peter Kirk, native son, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Our guest is Jim Hansen. Storms of My Grandchildren is his new book, The Truth About the Coming Climate Catastrophe and Our Last Chance to Save Humanity. I wanted to play for you, Dr. Hansen, the comment of the Prime Minister of Nepal. Days before the climate talks began in Copenhagen, cabinet ministers from Nepal held a cabinet meeting on Mount Everest at the base to send a message on the impact of global warming on the Himalayas. I spoke to the Nepalese Prime Minister in Copenhagen.
The global warming has its impact on the top of the mountain, and the snows are melting. Glaciers, many of the glaciers, Himalayan glaciers has evaporated, has disappeared. Many glacier lakes are emerging, and many of the glacier lakes are at the verge of outburst. So we have seen many landslides there, and no regular rainfall there, droughts and all these problems relating to the health of the people is been seen, and we have seen floods that is damaging many of the villages. The natural calamities is been seen, and the impact in the mountainous region is much more in the downstream, where 1.3 billion of the population live in India, in Bangladesh. So the problem of Nepal is not only the problem of Nepal's people, rather the problem of at least 1.3 billion of population.
That's the Nepali Prime Minister, Nepal. That is his name. Your response to that, Dr. Jim Hansen?
Well, yeah, we see the climate changes. It's at the top of the mountains. The glaciers all around the world are melting, and those glaciers are actually very important because they provide fresh water for the major rivers of the world. During the dry season, the rivers such as the Brahmaputra and the Ganges rivers, more than half the water in the river is from melting glaciers. So once those glaciers are gone, it's a real problem. But the problems are also occurring at the other end of the rivers. The coastline of Bangladesh, for example, is going to be moving inward, and you're going to have hundreds of millions of people who will be refugees. So it's especially these poor nations around the world that will suffer from climate change.
Last week, I also caught up with the president of the Maldives, Mohammed Nasheed. Now, this is a low-lying island, the Maldives, at the front line of climate change. And I asked him what a 3 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, because the IFCCC, the Climate Change Conference, apparently there was this document that we exposed on Democracy Now! With the French news organization Mediapart, saying that their plans, what they were putting forward, wouldn't actually increase the temperature by 2 degrees Celsius, but actually by 3 degrees. And I asked the Maldivian president, Mohamed Nasheed, to describe what that would mean for his country.